Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. Today I have Dr. Yvonne Petry here with us from Luther College, and she will tell us a little bit more about her research interests and the courses that she teaches at Luther. So thanks so much for being here with us today, Dr. Petry. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is at Luther College?
Sure. Well, I've been teaching at Luther College for over 20 years. I'm a history professor. I teach European history. I'm also currently the dean of the college. So at this point, I spend a lot of my time and energy doing administrative work rather than history. But I still teach my courses and still love teaching my courses.
That's great. So what courses do you teach or have you taught at Luther College?
Well, as I said, I'm a European historian. The history department at the University of Regina has historians in all kinds of fields. My specialization is what we refer to as early modern history. So those are the years, the centuries between about 1500 and 1700. And you might be familiar with the terms the Renaissance, the Reformation. This was also the era of the European witch hunts, and then the scientific revolution. So I teach courses that cover all of those topics, different emphasis in different courses. Probably my most popular course is the one on the history of the witch hunts. I also teach more specialized courses on the history of gender and sexuality, and I have a course on the history of medicine as well.
So interesting. So those courses I could see being very relevant to not just humanities, but maybe science students who want to understand a little bit more about the history of medicine if they're in like a pre-professional program, or do you tend to see those students in your classes?
Yeah, well, again, especially the history of medicine, which I'm teaching this fall, attracts a lot of more science majors than my other history courses do. And actually, I love teaching, well, I like teaching the history majors, but I love it when I have a course with students from all different disciplines, because every student brings something unique and different to our discussions about the past.
And it sounds like a very relevant course considering the times, right? You can
It'll be interesting teaching
understand
it
the
this
present.
term. Yeah, it'll be teaching it every time I teach a course. It's different, but history of medicine in the context of the pandemic will certainly be. I expect we will have lots of interesting conversations in class.
Absolutely. So why would you encourage a student to study in your discipline? We kind of said that, arts and humanities students, but also from beyond the arts and humanities. Why would you encourage a student to study history?
Sure. Well, I think there's lots of good reasons to study history. It is inherently interesting, I would say. It's not just facts and dates. It's thinking deeply about what has happened in the past and understanding people who lived in different times and places. But I would say one of the main reasons is that, in fact, learning history is relevant to understanding contemporary issues. And you've already brought up a very good example. We're living through a pandemic, and you will see in the news people talking about, well, what were other pandemics like? And so historians can bring an understanding of the Spanish flu epidemic of a century ago, which actually had nothing to do with Spain, but that's another story. Or I have a colleague teaching a course on the bubonic plague, the Black Death in the Middle Ages. So helping us, we can understand our own current context by bringing a historic perspective. Another really good, timely example, I think, is something else in the news. Why are some Americans tearing down statues of Confederate generals in the southern U.S., right? what's the history of those statues. It's important to understand why we remember what we do about the past and who gets remembered and who tells the story of the past. So, you know, a historian could bring to that conversation, well, what was Reconstruction like and why were statues of Confederate generals put up in the first place and why are people reacting to those now? And what other times in the past have people torn down statues? And then you can have a really interesting conversation about the Reformation when Protestants stormed churches and tore down statues. And then you can get into a broader reflection of, well, what is it that motivates people to do that, and what is there in society that that sets the stage for people to respond with that kind of energy. So again, the present takes us into the past. The past can also inform the present. So knowing a bit of the history helps contextualize who we are. So that's one reason. But I would also say then knowing the history also helps us reflect on the fact that things have not always been the way they are today, and that there are other ways of being, and that in the past people have thought things differently. So that's another important reason. And when I teach my course on the witch hunts, we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, why did people believe that witchcraft was real, and why did they believe that women had those kind of magical powers, and what assumptions were they working with? So again, history, we can take what we know, right? We have modern medicine, we have modern science, and we can go back into the past and think about, well, what would it have been like to not know some of the things that we know now?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've got one more reason.
Yes, please.
I would say studying history and taking history courses provides you with a whole set of transferable skills, we like to call them. Students with history backgrounds tend to do well, not only in grad school, but they go into the legal profession, or they become teachers, or researchers, or civil servants. When you take a history course, you learn how to research and investigate and think critically and write. And learning how to write well is hard, but it's one of the most worthwhile things you can spend your time doing at university. And I have seen history students who didn't start out very well as great writers, but they become really excellent writers. And those are skills that will serve students for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I have to say, I am a history major, but I think the career options are really so endless when you develop like a toolbox of skills like that, because you
Absolutely.
have the ability to communicate, you understand people, like you say, you understand a greater connection to humanity that's like beyond the present times. It's, you kind of understand a little bit more about people, and even from all over the world, and it helps you to understand, you know, why things are the way they might be today based on the lived experiences that people have had in different parts of the world. And yeah, it really gives you a lot of skills that would be relevant to so many different career paths. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and it gives you skills for your career, but I would also argue that history, like all of the liberal arts disciplines, just helps us to become thoughtful, educated, well-rounded people. And just as you say, I think history teaches us how to be empathetic, because we do realize that not everybody is the same as we are, that people were different 100 or 200 or 500 years ago. And that also then helps us understand why people in another part of the world might think things differently or think through things differently than we do.
Absolutely. So I think this might connect, but it sounds like a lot of those things do motivate you in your research. But is there anything else that you wanted to say that really just motivates you when you're researching and working on your own research? I know right now, since you're in an academic dean position, um, it might not all be focused on research and writing like it might be more when you're just working, not just, but working as a faculty member and teaching. But what is motivating for you when you're doing research and writing?
Sure. Well, and I guess I would say the primary motivation really is curiosity. I became a history major because I am fascinated by learning about peoples and cultures that are different than my own. So in a way, I love traveling, and I love to study history for the same reason that I like traveling, because it's really a way of exploring. And I tell my students that when we're going back 500 years in the past, you really need to kind of use an active imagination to think about, well, what would it have been like to not know any of the things that we take for granted today. So yeah, I would say it's I'm just very curious to understand how other people live and think and experience the world.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything that you would say challenges you the most?
Well, I guess for me right now, the most challenging aspect is I don't have the time to do the work, research, and the writing that I would like to do. Being the dean of the college is pretty much a full-time job. So that's my biggest challenge. The work that I do, the research that I do, I use 16th century French books. So, and I do read French, but reading 16th century French would be kind of like reading Shakespearean English. When I was a graduate student, it took me a while to get used to early modern French, but now it comes quite easily. And I will say some things are easier now. A lot of historic sources have been digitized, so it's actually easier to do historical research now than it would have been 10 or 20 years ago.
You don't necessarily have to go to France to find.
No, well, and that's the upside and the downside.
Right.
I can read 16th century French books from my office, but I do miss those trips to Paris where I spent weeks in the beautiful libraries in Paris.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So would you have any final tips or words that you might want to share with a student who might be considering a course in history but has just never really thought about it, or might have some questions still, or just, might be from outside of the discipline? So anything that you want to share with them?
Yeah, well, I would say history courses are good electives, no matter what your major is. The history department offers all kinds of topics in history, so look for a topic that sounds interesting and just plunge in. You will find that it isn't about sitting and memorizing. Your professors will ask you to, like I say, probably do some research on a topic and maybe compare interpretations of the past, right? And don't be afraid of doing that research. Again, that's important to learn how to do. And we have great librarians at Luther and at the university who help you develop those skills. And I would also ask our students, don't be afraid of the writing assignments. In history, you will be doing some writing, and that's sometimes scary, but on the other hand, it's important to learn how to do that. And like I said, history students tend to do well in other courses as well, and to do well beyond. So I guess my advice would be find a topic you're interested in and sign up for it.
That's great. Yeah, I remember being a history student and having friends in business and engineering, and they would be doing different types of assignments, but never sitting down and just crushing out a 12-page paper, sometimes in like a 48 to 72 hour period, right? But those assignments do really challenge you. Those are the growth opportunities, right? So I think
absolutely. Yeah.
So. Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up, or?
Just want to say to our incoming students here, I'm speaking as the dean. Just want to welcome you to Luther College and the university. I know we're in a really challenging time in all of our lives, and I know that it's hard to start university any year, but I know that you have some challenges this year coming. You know, we can't welcome you on campus the way that we would like you, but please know that the staff and faculty at Luther College are here for you. We have your backs, we're thinking of you, and we're doing our best to make your transition to Luther College and the university as easy as it can be.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, thanks for being here with us today, and we really appreciate your time.
Sure, thank you.